Professor Shur will be talking about, or sir will be giving a synoptic view of Indian business sector about the impact of COVID. So before I call Professor Debasish Shur for his deliberations, let me briefly introduce Professor Shur. Professor Dr. Debasish Shur is professor at the University of Commerce professor at the Department of Commerce of the University of Burdwan, West Bengal. He has a very enviable academic career. Let me list it out. He is a gold medalist in MCom, topper in MPhil, stood first class first in BCom from the University of Burdwan. He has done his PhD in a very contemporary topic of human resource accounting. He has over 24 years of teaching experience at the postgraduate level, out of which 11 years as professor. He is an invited member of various academic bodies in different central and state universities in India. He is also a member of NAC peer team. Professor Shur has so far contributed more than 100 papers in reputed professional and academic journals. He has authored 4 books. Dr. Shur has acted as visiting faculty in different universities in India. Under his supervision, 18 researchers and 22 scholars have completed their PhD and MPhil degrees, respectively. Dr. Shur has attended many seminars and conferences in India and abroad, and also acted as resource person in several national and international seminars. He is also acting as reviewer in many internationally acclaimed publishing houses like Palgrave Macmillan, Taylor & Francis, Springer, Emerald, etc. So with this brief introduction, may I now request Dr. Shur to kindly start your deliberation, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Abhijit. Good afternoon to everyone present here. Respected Professor Ranjan Kumar Bal, sir. Respected teacher in charge of Dr. Bhupendra Nath Dutta Smriti Mahavidyalaya, Dr. Nirmala Raju, Professor Shabuni Bose of the same college, my beloved student, Dr. Abhijit Rai, other distinguished professors present here, my dear students and ladies and gentlemen. Now we have assembled here to make some discussion on the issue entitled COVID-19 and Indian Businesses, a Synoptic View. We all know that COVID-19 was first found in India in the last week of January 2020. That means we have already spent a period of more than 10 months. Lockdown started in India on 25th March 2020. We have already completed 4th phase of lockdown, and now we are still in semi-lockdown phase. So there has been a tremendous impact of COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown on Indian economy as well as the world economy. In this context, we can mention some information. We all know that the United States of America, USA, is the most powerful country in the world from the economic point of view. In fact, USA is financially the strongest country in the world. In USA, in the last April, that means in April 2020, about 15 to 17% employees have lost their job. More than 2 crore people have become jobless in the month of April 2020 in USA. Now, if we consider the India's situation, we find that the India's picture is more alarming. If we go through the report published by the CMI, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, we find that the unemployment rate in India, which was less than 7% in the mid-March 2020, became more than 27%, 27.11% in the past week of May. It was 29% in the urban areas and 26% in the rural areas. However, unemployment rate has slightly declined in the last week of May 2000. As per the report published by the CMI on May 27, 2020, unemployment rate in India was about 24%. It was 26.5% in the urban areas and 22.9% in the rural areas. During this lockdown period, more than 14 crore people have become jobless. They have lost their job. So it has a severe impact on Indian business sector. However, as per the report published by the CMI, the unemployment rate in the month of July was 7.45%. It was 9.15% in the urban areas and 6.66% in the rural areas. Similarly, if we consider the report published by the CMI on 6th November, 2020, we find that the unemployment rate in India was 6.7%. It was 7.1% in the urban areas and 6.6% in the rural areas. That means after July 2020, the unemployment rate in India has declined significantly. However, we can say that the data provided by the CMI may not reflect the true picture of the Indian business sector. In this context, we can mention one study conducted by the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FICCI. FICCI has conducted one study on the basis of 380 big companies across the sectors. Now let us consider the major findings of the study. Number one, this study reveals that there has been a tremendous uncertainty in the Indian business environment during this pandemic situation. COVID-19 is having deep impact on Indian businesses. Number two, this study also reveals that 72% of the sample companies have been placed in the category of very high level of risk. Another important outcome of the study is that 70% of the sample companies are expecting a degrowth. That means a negative growth in their sales turnover during the financial year 2020-21. As a result, size of business or scale of operation has gone down significantly in the current financial year. In this context, we can mention the names of some significant companies like L&T, Tata Motors, Ultratech Cement, and many companies belonging to the FMCG sectors, including Unilever, Hindustan Lever. Even Maharatna Central Public Sector Enterprise, BHEL, all have downsized their business operations in the current financial year. Another significant outcome of this study is that 61% of the sample companies have postponed their expansion program for a period of 6 months to 12 months, and 33% of the sample companies have postponed their expansion program for a period of more than 12 months. That means 94% of the sample companies have postponed their expansion program due to this COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. Another notable outcome of this study is that 60% of the sample companies have postponed their fundraising plan for a period of 6 months to 12 months, and 25% of the sample companies have postponed their fundraising plan for a period of more than 1 year. So we can say that 85% of the sample companies have postponed their fundraising plan due to this COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. On the basis of the outcomes derived from these studies, it can be said that India's business sector has been facing tremendous challenges emanated from COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. Now, let us consider some additional information in this respect. More than 6,600 Indian companies have legal linkages with companies in countries with a large number of confirmed COVID-19 cases. That means more than 6,600 Indian companies have legal linkages with those foreign companies which are situated in such countries where the outbreak of COVID-19 is severe. In this context, we can cite the example of China. We all know that there is a very close association between India and China in respect of international trade. And we also know that China is the world's largest exporter. It accounts for about 13% of the world exports. And China is the second largest importer in the world. It accounts for about 11% of the world's imports. China accounts for about 13% of the world exports. And out of this 13%, 5% comes to India. In fact, China contributes more than 14% of the India's total imports. More specifically, we can mention that 45% of the India's total electronics imports come from China. One third, that means 33% of the India's total machinery imports come from China. 40% of the India's total organic chemical imports come from China. In case of fertilizer and automotive parts, this is 25%. 70% of the India's total pharmaceutical ingredients imports come from China. And in case of mobile phone, this is more than 90%. So these industries have been highly affected by COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. We all know that there is a close association between large-scale industries and micro, small, and medium enterprises, that is MSME sectors. They are interrelated and interconnected. And specifically, we can mention that the large-scale industries largely depend on the supply made by the MSME sector. Similarly, MSME sector largely depends on the demand of the large-scale industries. So they are interrelated and interconnected. And it is also to be noted that MSME sector contributes more than 30% of the India's GDP. And MSME sector generally follows a growth rate of at least 10% per annum. Another important point regarding India's MSME sector is that 45% of the India's total exports are contributed by MSME sector. So MSME sector plays a very vital role in Indian business world. So due to this COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown, both large-scale industries and MSME sectors have been severely affected. Now let us consider some important information regarding India's economy. As per the assessment made by the World Bank in the month of April 2020, it was expected that India's growth rate would be 1.5% to 2.8% in the current financial year. Similarly, as per the assessment made by the United Nations, UN, in the month of April 2020, it was expected that India's growth rate would be 1.2% in the current financial year. However, as per the assessment made by the World Bank in the month of June 2020, it was expected that the India's growth rate would be minus 3.2% in the current financial year. Similarly, as per the projection made by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, it was expected that the India's GDP growth rate would be 1.9% in the current financial year. However, as per the statement made by the RBI governor, Mr. Shaktikant Das, that India is expecting a degrowth in the current financial year in its GDP in the current financial year. Similarly, as per the assessment, as per the projection made by the International Monetary Fund, it was expected that India's GDP growth rate would be minus 1.5%. However, we can say that as per the report published by the National Statistical Office under the Ministry of Statistics and Programming Implementation, Government of India, the India's GDP growth rate in the first quarter of the current financial year was minus 23.9%, minus 23.9%, whereas it was 5.2 plus 5.2% in the first quarter of the previous financial year. So on the basis of this information, it can be said that India's economy has been facing immense threats emanated from COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. As a result, India's business sector has also been facing tremendous challenges stemmed from such COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. Now, what are the reasons behind it? We all know that there are four basic components of GDP: personal consumption expenditure, business investment, government spending, and net export. And we also know that personal consumption expenditure is the biggest components of GDP. On an average, 60% of the GDP is contributed, in case of India, India's personal consumption expenditure on an average contributes 60% of the India's GDP. If we consider all these four components one by one in the context of the present day situation, we can understand this more clearly. Now, if we consider net export, that means excess of exports over import, we find that there has been a drastic fall in both import and exports activities in India during this pandemic situation. If we consider the figures relating to the month of March 2020, we find that out of 30 major items, both exports and imports of 29 items have reduced significantly. In the month of May 2020, the situation has improved slightly. Out of 30 major items, both exports and imports of 26 items have reduced significantly. In the month of May 2020, on an average, India's exports have reduced by 37%. In case of imports, these figures vary from 45% to 98%. Machinery imports have reduced by 45%. Gold and jewelry imports have declined by 98%. Even crude oil imports have reduced by about 70%. So we can say that there has been a drastic fall in both exports and imports activities in India during this pandemic situation. Now, if we consider government spending, we find that the government is paying salary only. And in many cases, salary has been cut. There is no new business investment. So obviously, India's GDP will almost entirely depend on personal consumption expenditure in the near future. As per the principles followed in economics, we can say that if personal consumption expenditure goes up, real sector growth rate increases. If real sector growth rate increases, employment steps up. If employment increases, income increases. And if income increases, demand goes up. That means purchasing power or spending power goes up. However, in the present day situation, we find exactly the reverse picture. There has been a drastic fall in the personal consumption expenditure during this pandemic situation. Personal consumption expenditure has reduced by 20% in the month of March 2020 as compared to the figure of the last quarter of the previous financial year. In subsequent months, it has reduced more. As a result, real sector growth rate has reduced, employment has reduced, income has reduced, and ultimately demand has gone down. Internal supply chain as well as global supply chain have been severely disrupted during this abnormal situation. Now, what is the way out? What are the measures that are to be adopted in order to combat this situation? We can say that we are not in a position to make final conclusion. We are not in a position to make final prescription. Even we are not in a position to identify the exact measures which are to be adopted in order to combat this situation. However, we can mention at least two major points which may be adopted, two major measures which may be adopted in order to combat this situation. The first one is that public distribution system should be efficiently managed. Now, question may arise whether there is any relationship between public distribution system and Indian businesses. I must say that yes, there is a positive relationship between the strength of public distribution system and the success of Indian businesses, especially in the present day situation. Because we all can say that if public distribution system is properly run, then only people will get adequate amount of food grains and other essential commodities. And if it happens, then people will be in a position to spend some money for acquisition of non-essential commodities also. As a result, consumption expenditure will go up and ultimately demand will go up. So on the basis of this, it can be said that there is a positive relationship between the strength of public distribution system and the success of Indian businesses. However, public distribution system is not running properly in India due to certain causes. In this context, we can mention at least 2 points. The first one is lack of information. Government does not have adequate information about the needs of the people, especially people living in the rural areas, people living in the remote villages. That's why proper distribution of essential commodities cannot be made. Unequal distribution of essential commodities will arise. Secondly, high level of corruption is involved in the public distribution system in India, because huge amount of fund is involved in the public distribution system. That's why a high level of corruption is involved in the public distribution system in India. In this context, we can mention at least 2 points. The first one is about 80 crore people are the beneficiaries of public distribution system in India. That means 58% of the people in India depend on public distribution system. Secondly, for the current financial year, for the financial year 2020-21, fund allocated by the government for providing food subsidy is rupees 1,15,570 crore, which is about 3.8% of the total estimated expenditure as per the budget estimate relating to the fiscal year 2020-21. So huge amount of fund is involved in the public distribution system. That's why high level of corruption is involved in the public distribution system. So if we minimize these odds, that means if we remove this problem, then only public distribution system can be efficiently managed. Public distribution system can be effectively run. Secondly, we can mention the prescription of renowned economist, Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay. According to the prescription of Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay, print currency notes and distribute these currency notes among people without considering the issues associated with inflation. It has already been done successfully in USA and Japan. According to his argument, if people get money, consumption expenditure will go up, and ultimately real sector growth rate will increase, employment will step up, income will increase, and ultimately demand will go up. So the prescription of Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay can be implemented in order to combat the situation arising out of COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. In this context, we can also mention the names of some significant personalities also. We can mention the name of famous economist, Professor Raghuram Rajan, ex-governor of RBI. We can also mention the name of Marxist economist, Professor Prabhat Pattanayak of JNU. Even we can mention the name of CII President, Mr. Uday Kotak. So all have made the same recommendations. Then we can say that eminent personalities from different corners eminent personalities from different fields, even eminent personalities belonging to the different ideologies have made the same recommendations. They have given the same opinion as prescribed by Professor Avijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay. So the prescription of Professor Avijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay can be adopted in order to combat this situation. However, it has a negative side also. Presently, the confidence level of people in India has gone down significantly. People are not in a position to predict what will happen in near future. That's why their confidence level has gone down. In this context, we can mention one survey conducted by RBI in the month of May 2020. As per the RBI survey report, the Future Expectation Index, which measures consumers' perception of the economy, was 97.9. In fact, a score below 100 indicates consumers' pessimism. So as the Future Expectation Index in India is 97.9, which is below 100, it indicates that the consumers are pessimist. They are not optimist. Their confidence level has gone down significantly. So if the confidence level of people does not improve, then we can say that people will not spend money received by them for their present consumption. In that case, people will save money for their future consumption. And if it happens, then we can say that money will not come back to the market. That means consumption expenditure will not go up and ultimately demand will not go up. So this is the negative side of the prescription of Professor Avijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay. So during the last 25 or 30 minutes, we have been mentioning only the negative points, only the odds. Now we have to mention one positive side, one hope. So let us consider one silver lining behind the corona cloud. We have already mentioned that China is the largest exporter in the world. It accounts for about 13% of the world export. And China is the second largest importer after USA in the world. It accounts for about 11% of the world's imports. So China plays a very vital role in international market. Now it is expected that China will not be able to retain its shares in the international market in near future due to this COVID-19 outbreak. Because we all can remember that COVID-19 was first reported in China on 17th November 2019, and it has a severe negative impact on Chinese economy. Even from the perception of the people, we can say that it has a negative impact on China. The first outbreak of COVID-19 in China has definitely hampered the reputation and goodwill of China in the world market. And as a result, China may not be able to retain its dominance over the international market. And if it happens, that means if China is not able to retain its shares in the international market, then foreign capital may come to India. Because India enjoys certain competitive advantages. India enjoys certain benefits. In this context, we can mention at least 3 points. The first one is that India enjoys demographic advantages. About 64% of the people in India belong to the age group of 20 to 35 years. So India has sufficient cheap labor force. Secondly, India has adequate number of skilled IT personnel. Thirdly, political stability in India is much higher as compared to the other neighboring countries. In this context, we can also mention the World Bank's ease of doing business ranking. As per the World Bank's ease of doing business ranking, India captured 142nd rank in the year 2014 out of 190 countries in the world. In 2015, India's rank was 131. In both 2016 and 17, India's rank was 130. In 2018, India made a significant improvement in its status and reached 77th rank. In October 2019, India's rank was 63. So with the passage of time, India has been improving its status in respect of ease of doing business ranking, in respect of World Bank's ease of doing business ranking. And on the basis of this, it can be said that foreign capital may come to India. And if foreign capital comes to India, then it is expected that India's business sector will do better in near future. So in this context, we can say that we all know that the foreign direct investment will not only augment capital formation, but also act as a vehicle for technology upgradations, skill development, export promotion, job creation, and we can say that the improvement of the overall competitiveness of the economy. So obviously, this is a huge opportunity for India in the post-COVID era. And if we grab this opportunity, then we can say that in future, at least a considerable number of years would belong to India at the global stage. That means India's business sector will do better in near future. So this is our expectation, this is our anticipation, and this is our prediction. We all know that the success of any prediction or any projection depends on certain factors. Today, before concluding my discussion, I have to mention one very important factor, one vital factor. So in this context, we can mention the name of famous social and political theorist, Professor John Elster, Professor of Political Science, Columbia University. And we must mention his classic entitled The Cement of Society, a Study of Social Order. According to his famous book, any prediction or any projection can be successfully achieved if proper cooperation is there. That means if proper cooperation is present in the economy, then only any prediction or any projection can be successfully achieved. In this context, we can also mention the name of famous British-born Marxist economic geographer and distinguished professor of anthropology and economic geography at the City University of New York, Professor David Harvey. Professor David Harvey has given emphasis on collective efforts and collective response in order to combat the situation arising out of COVID-19 in the global economy. He has published one article in Jacobin. Jacobin is a famous magazine in USA. He has published one article in Jacobin on 3rd June 2020. I just quote one sentence from his article. We need a collective response to the collective dilemma of coronavirus. So Professor Harvey has given emphasis on collective efforts and collective response in order to combat this situation. And we all know that collective efforts, collective response, and cooperation all are interdependent and interrelated. So again, we can say that if proper cooperation is present in the economy, then only any prediction or any projection can be successfully achieved. However, we all know that there are certain factors which may hamper, which may hurt the strength of cooperation. In this context, we can mention at least 3 points. The first one is personal ego. This is associated with human behavior. Personal ego means personal ego of the stakeholders, personal ego of the political leaders, personal ego of the administrators. So if negative ego takes place, strength of cooperation goes down. Secondly, irregularities and corruptions. If irregularities and corruptions arise, personal interest takes place. As a result, strength of cooperation goes down. Thirdly, irrationalities. This is also associated with human behavior. If we are not rational enough, if we are irrational, obviously the strength of cooperation goes down. So if we minimize the negative impact of these factors, then only we can say that the strength of cooperation will go up. And if strength of cooperation restores, if strength of cooperation enhances, then only any prediction or any projection can be successfully achieved. And if it happens, It is expected that India's business sector will do better in near future. So with this hope, I am concluding my discussion. I must convey my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Nirmala Rajok and her associates who have given me an opportunity to act as resource person in this national level webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Debasish. Sir, it was really excellent and it was packed of information. Sir has actually touched upon the problem of COVID-19 or impact of COVID-19, the severity of COVID-19 on Indian business sector with special focus on India-China interdependence, on the significance of MSME sector and how this COVID-19 has impacted the MSME sector. Sir has nicely interconnected the issue of unemployment and the GDP, because Sir has mentioned that personal consumption comprises the majority of India's GDP, and definitely when we have a higher unemployment, that harms the personal consumption. Sir has also mentioned how to combat this situation, and where Sir has quite interestingly said that public distribution system can act as a key to boost the economy in this particular situation. The increase of the currency notes supply in the economy can be another option, and he has mentioned that why these are going to be good options, because future expectations of Indian consumers are pessimistic. Sir has concluded the speech with a hope that India's reputational advantage and competitive advantage over China is actually going to help us to overcome this situation. So I thank you, sir. I will take a few questions that we have in the chat box. Professor Jagannath Hati of Shamsundar College, sir, has asked two questions. First, I am reading out the first one. How India-China relationship today affects India's business environment? That is the first question of Professor Hati.
Yes, thank you very much for this question, Dr. Hati. I have already mentioned that India largely depend on China. I have already mentioned some figures and data. Especially if we mention pharmaceutical sectors, we can say that 70% of the India's pharmaceutical ingredients imports come from China. So, and in other industries, many industries like organic chemical, machinery, electronics, mobile phone, and many industries largely depend on China. This is number one. And we all know that this large industry on this actually our MSME sector also depends on this large industry. So obviously this COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown has hampered the our relationship between China, and India, and it has hampered directly and indirectly our many sectors like I have already mentioned here. These sectors have been severely affected by this COVID-19 outbreak. So this is the answer.
Okay, Professor Hati has another question. How special financial package of Government of India can boost the corporate sector?
Special financial package?
Special financial package can boost the corporate
special
sector.
Financial package to whom?
To corporates. Can okay, that is not clear. Special financial package
to the people.
I think you have mentioned about public distribution system, so probably the question may be related to that.
Yes, obviously the main problem is that demand has gone down significantly. So we have to demand is to be stepped up. Demand is to be increased. So in order to improve the demand, so obviously the purchasing capacity or spending capacity should be improved. Spending capacity of the general people should be improved. So obviously, if if we adopt the prescription of Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay, I think at least this problem can be partially solved, not fully, but partially this problem can be solved by adopting Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay's prescription. Demand can be improved, demand can be increased, or personal consumption expenditure can be improved. And if personal consumption expenditure improves, then obviously demand will go up, and business sector will be benefited.
Okay, thank you. Sir, we have a question from Dr. Amitava Mondol. Dr. Mondol has asked Indian economy severely, but Indian stock market is indicating favorable conditions about the economy. So please highlight. That is the question.
Actually, India capital market, it's a very tough question because again we can say that we are not in a position to make the final conclusion. Capital market depends on many factors. Capital market depends not only on one or two factors. Here, unemployment, several indicators are there, economic indicators are there, several sectors are there. Some sectors are doing extremely well, and some sectors are doing extremely bad. So obviously we can say that here we have to examine those variables, that means those economy specific variables, those macroeconomic variables. And if we examine those variables one by one, then only we can identify what is the reason behind it. Okay, so just on the basis of this observation, on the basis of some observations, we can't say anything. We can't judge our capital market, or we can't identify the exact reasons behind this situation.
Okay, sir. Gaurav Paja has thanked you for your wonderful deliberation, and he has put a question: the impact of Atmanirbhar Bharat on Indian business sector. That is his question, sir.
Yes, in Atmanirbhar Bharat package, there are several good things. If so, we all know that if it is properly implemented, obviously Indian business sector, Indian economy will be benefited. But we all know that one major problem in our country is corruption. Another is nepotism, favoritism. So if we remove this general problem, this is the general problem, corruptions, nepotism, favoritism, even we can say that political leaders, that means the elected members of the parliament and elected members of the legislative assembly, they are not accountable. They are not accountable. If we minimize, at least minimize corruption, if we remove nepotism, if we remove favoritism, then only we can say that this scheme can be properly implemented. And this is the main problem. In past, we have already seen that many good proposals were there, many good projects were there, but they were not successfully implemented due to this inherent limitations. So these limitations should be removed. Otherwise, it would not be possible for India to make self-reliant, to implement the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhijan package.
Okay, sir, with your permission, can I take one more question?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, Abhijit Kumar has asked how pandemic coronavirus may impact the agriculture sector and farmers' income.
Agriculture sector and
farmers' income.
Definitely, to some extent, it has been affected, but not very severely. To some extent, affected in this context, we can say that we have already faced, we have already completed fourth phase of lockdown, and still we are in semi-lockdown phase. But in the agriculture sector, no lockdown is, now there is no lockdown. So obviously agriculture sector is doing better. But one thing is very important here, that is due to this lockdown, our transport system has collapsed. To presently it has already started, but few months back we can say that it has been severely affected. And secondly, the supply of different items which are used in agriculture, say supply of fertilizers, supply of seeds, or many other things which are generally used in agriculture. So obviously this supply line has been severely disrupted. So this is the negative impact. These are the negative effects of COVID-19, outbreak of COVID-19 and subsequent lockdown on Indian agriculture sector.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think we don't have any more question in the chat box. So thank you, sir, for your wonderful deliberation and very interactive session at the end of your speech. May I now request Professor Dr. Shravani Bose, coordinator of IQAC, to offer a formal vote of thanks to our very esteemed guests, speakers today. So over to you, madam.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We have reached the end of this national webinar organized by Department of Commerce and Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Dr. Bhupendra Datta Smriti Mahavidyalaya. First of all, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to our honorable speaker, Dr. Ranjan Kumar Bal, retired professor, Department of Commerce, Utkal University, Odisha, for his valuable and enlightening words. Thank you, sir. I would like to extend my heartiest thanks to our honorable speaker, Dr. Debasish, Professor, the University of Burdwan, Department of Commerce, for his excellent deliberation and enriching words. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank all the participants from different colleges and universities for their active presence in this national webinar. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our teacher in charge, Dr. Nirmala Rajo, for her support and guidance for organizing this national webinar. I also extend my thanks to our teaching staff, librarian and non-teaching staff of our college for their enormous cooperation in the organization of this national webinar. I would like to thank all the teachers of Commerce Department of our college for their hard work, which has made this webinar successful for all of us. At last, I would like to thank Sri Manush Bishwas for his technical support. Thank you all. Have a good day. Thank you again. Now I hand over the microphone to Dr. Abhijit Roy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, madam. So with permission of Professor Dr. Nirmala Rajo, can we just call it a day? Can we close the meeting?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you all the resource persons and participants. Thank you very much. Thank you.